Peruvian President Pedro Castillo arrived in the Bolivian city of El Alto as part of an official visit during which he will meet with President Luis Arce. According to the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, many of the gains made in the well-being of the population of the most developed countries in Latin America are at risk of being lost due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Thousands of Sudanese poured into the streets on Saturday to protest against a military coup earlier this week, which threatens to derail the country's transition to democracy. From the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is from the South. I'm Katrina Goss. Peruvian President Pedro Castillo arrived in the Bolivian city of El Alto as part of an official visit during which he will meet with President Luis Arce. This is the first official meeting between Arce and Castillo. The Peruvian president travelled to Bolivia accompanied by 15 of his ministers and will head a presidential meeting in the city of La Paz and the 6th Bolivia-Peru binational ministerial cabinet, which will coordinate measures in favour of the populations of both countries. The agenda includes talks on infrastructure for integration, cross-border water resources, social policies and security. In Venezuela, the campaign for the regional and municipal elections of November 21st has kicked off with the participation of about 70,000 candidates from all political parties. Our correspondent, Madeline Garcia, has the details.
She is Carmen Menendez, a candidate from the Revolutionary Bloc. She is running for one of the most important city halls in the country, the mayor's office of the capital of Venezuela. To keep the revolution on the attack internationally, with the economic blockade, political destabilization is the great challenge.
We are starting our campaign. We are coming from Katia to Macará with our iron horses, from where we greet the people with a promising campaign. A campaign where we are building the triumph of November 21st with our people on the streets. We will be in all the corners of Caracas.
Tomás Juanipa is running for the same district. He is a candidate of the so-called Democratic Unity Roundtable, the bloc of political parties supported by the United States that promoted illegal economic sanctions, coup attempts and assassinations. And those who previously did not want to participate in the elections, betting on a violent solution, are now clinging to the vote.
We will respect the people's decision. The people need to vote and choose. If the people vote and choose, what the people say is what is going to be done, and in the end, we ask everyone to go and vote.
There are 70,000 candidates running for 23 governorships and 3,035 municipal governments. 80% are from the opposition. On November 21st, Venezuela's stability is at stake.
The future of our country, the peace of our country is at stake. Our proposal has always been that President Nicolás Maduro has made countless calls to consolidate peace, to dialogue. It has not been us who have broken with the premise of always solving problems through dialogue.
A representation of the more than 100 European Union election observers is in the country to witness the 29th electoral process. They were amazed by the diversity of candidates and political parties.
There has been a change. The opposition is also in these elections. It is going to participate in these elections, and we have an electoral commission with members of the ruling parties, members of the opposition parties with broad participation. And this is an important moment for us and also because we have been invited.
The Carter Center also signed a memorandum of understanding to provide support for the regional elections in which it is committed to respect the country's constitutional regulations. The electoral campaign concludes on November 18, meaning that the 70,000 candidates of the opposition and those from the Revolutionary Bloc will have 21 days to present their government proposals. Meanwhile, international and national observers are closely following the process.
Brazil under President Jair Bolsonaro has seen a surge of far-right groups. Our correspondent Brian Meir brings us more details on how such extremists are operating in the country.
According to a study at Unicamp University, the number of neo-Nazi cells in Brazil has doubled since President Jair Bolsonaro took office in 2019. Fascism is on the rise, and Brazilian fascists are increasingly coordinating actions with the international far right.
There is a global crisis of capitalism on the way, and there are far-right groups working together, white supremacists and internet activists like Steve Bannon, who project a way of thinking that ends up attracting people who have personal problems, who are unemployed, and we know that fascism is growing right now.
This week, a group of green and yellow-clad anti-vaccine protesters brandishing international white supremacist symbols and signs in English broke into Porto Alegre City Council and threatened members of the Afro-Brazilian caucus while yelling racist insults.
You are my maid! You are my maid! You are my maid!
We are the resistance of this entire project that denies science and the right to vaccination, that denies the right to food security, that aims to maintain all the privilege that started back in that violent days of slavery in Brazil.
The Porto Alegre Municipal Guard refused to protect the city councillors, but they managed to expel the protesters from the building by themselves. Brian Meir, TeleSUR, São Paulo.
And we'll be right back after this very short break. Don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. Many of the improvements in the well-being of the population of the most developed countries in Latin America are at risk of being lost due to the COVID-19 pandemic. In a report that analyses 11 countries, Argentina, Brazil, Chile, Colombia, Costa Rica, the Dominican Republic, Ecuador, Mexico, Paraguay, Peru and Uruguay, the Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development looks at different indicators of well-being, not only gross domestic product. The report highlights that between the year 2000 and 2019, there were considerable improvements in well-being, with a fall in absolute poverty, a substantial decrease in income inequality, improved access to clean water and internet, and even a rise in life expectancy. However, the pace of progress has slowed since the mid-2010s. Now, COVID-19 risks reversing many of the gains achieved. In 2020, both absolute poverty and unemployment sharply increased throughout the region, while incomes, employment and labour force participation fell. The World Bank confirmed in its latest report that Colombia currently ranks first in the Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development region of countries with the highest rates of inequality in Latin America and the Caribbean. The peak of inequality in the country is evidenced by the summary of the income of the wealthiest 10% of the population, which is 11 times higher than the income of the poorest 10%. Income inequality is even more extreme between men and women, according to the report, which claimed that a woman in Colombia is 1.7 times more likely to be unemployed than a man. The lack of social mobility in Colombia means the chances that children are unable to escape the poverty of their parents are higher than in many other parts of the world. In Bolivia, the national and local governments are preparing measures to be implemented in the face of the imminent fourth wave of the novel coronavirus pandemic, which has already begun to manifest itself in 3 of the country's 9 departments. Our correspondent Freddy Morales has the details.
Mayors, governors and the national government are in charge of the 3 levels of healthcare. They all participate in this kind of summit that defines measures to face the imminent fourth wave of the novel coronavirus. They are committing themselves to implement more vaccination points, to carry out campaigns in markets and other centers with a high influx of people, and this will be intensively extended.
We have to fight together against the anti-vaccination groups. That is the biggest problem we have had in the city of El Alto, the platforms that misinform about vaccination.
The stock of resources to deal with the fourth wave is promising. Vaccines are available, although there is still resistance from sectors of the population to receive them. And there are enough free medicines available. The number of antigen diagnosis points nationwide has increased by 2,567. And we have acquired 4,435 antigen tests. Similarly, in terms of human resources, we are committed to immediately hiring 1,806 people to continue strengthening the intensive and intermediate care units. Vaccination has reached 63% of the population with the first dose, and more than 53% with the second dose, at a time when it is virtually accepted that the fourth wave has already entered the country. Some departments where this is the beginning are Santa Cruz, Cochabamba and Chuquichaca. But we cannot speak of fourth wave in the country because there are no several departments that do not have a fourth wave. President Luis Arce from the Department of Beni called for an all-out fight against the novel coronavirus and recalled that this is also a definite phase in the fight against poverty. We must all be aware that the economic recovery has a fundamental assumption. To recover health for all, there will be no reconstruction, no reactivation of the economy in the country if we do not solve the pandemic problem first. From March 2020 to date, the country has officially recorded 505,000 cases of the novel coronavirus, with almost 19,000 deaths. The case fatality rate in the second and third waves was 2.7%, with an imminence of the fourth wave. The health ministry warned that in case of flu or cold is considered COVID until proven otherwise.
Freddy Morales, TeleSUR, Bolivia.
The first in-person G20 summit since the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic is being hosted by Italy. Leaders from the world's 20 leading economies will discuss the global economic recovery, climate change, COVID-19 vaccines, the supply chain crisis and rising energy prices. Italian Prime Minister Mario Draghi stressed the importance of multilateralism on Saturday as he welcomed world leaders to Rome. He also used his opening statement to issue a call for redoubled efforts to get vaccines to the world's least wealthy countries.
Be aware of the challenges we face collectively. The pandemic is not over, and there are startling disparities in the global distribution of vaccines. In high-income countries, more than 70% of the population has received at least one dose. In the poorest ones, this percentage drops to roughly 3%. These differences are morally unacceptable and undermine the global recovery.
And we have more stories coming up after this final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. Thousands of Sudanese poured into the streets on Saturday to protest against a military coup earlier this week, which threatens to derail the country's transition to democracy. Pro-democracy groups had called for mass protest marches across the country to press their demands to reinstate the dissolved transitional government and release senior political figures from detention. According to local authorities, at least 8 people have been killed and 170 wounded in protests since the army's power grab on Monday. The list of demands also includes dismantling paramilitary groups and restructuring the military, intelligence and security agencies to remove officers still loyal to ousted President Omar al-Bashir.
The Sudanese people are determined to take to the streets tomorrow in order to restore the achievements of the glorious December Revolution, which raised the slogan freedom, peace and justice. We will take to the streets tomorrow to tell the world that we need this democratic transition and we do not need a military coup because it did not serve the country during the previous military rule. The Sudanese people were only offered humiliation and destruction of their country. The December Revolution is stronger with its youth, women and men who will take to the streets on the 30th, not for partisan reasons or other pursuits, but to bring back the Sudanese revolution.
First of all, in relation to Sudan, I want to reaffirm my strong condemnation of the coup and the need to reestablish the transition system that was in place. And tomorrow there is a manifestation that is announced. I urge the military to show restraint and not to create any more victims. People must be allowed to demonstrate peacefully.
Jordan and Syria are to start supplying Lebanon with electricity through Syria starting next year as the country struggles with a lack of fuel amidst its major economic crisis. The Jordanian Minister of Energy announced a final version of the electric energy exchange contract had been reached, through which Lebanon will be supplied with its needs, following a meeting with his Syrian and Lebanese counterparts in Amman. For nearly 2 years, Lebanon has witnessed an unprecedented economic collapse that has paralysed its ability to import vital commodities, most notably fuel. The scarcity has been reflected in various sectors such as electricity, hospitals, bakeries, communications and foodstuffs. The project's covered by a loan from the World Bank.
The final version of the electric power exchange contract has been reached, through which Lebanon will be supplied with its needs. There are technical issues that must be worked on, so that the supply networks are ready. Our brothers in Syria confirmed that work is underway on this issue and hopefully it will be completed by the end of this year. The agreement that we have reached aims to enhance the conditions of our electricity sector, whether it is in terms of the cost of production or the cost of the electricity or the cost of its transmission through Syrian territory. We started to rehabilitate the electricity line linking Syria and Jordan at a cost of $5.5 million. The final version.
Demonstrators took to the streets of Mali's capital Bamako on Friday to protest the French military presence in the country. Protesters called for the total withdrawal of French troops and an end to foreign meddling in the country. France has more than 5,000 military personnel based in Mali and the West African Sahel region, supposedly to help counter militants linked to Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State. But the mission is facing increasing opposition at home and in Mali. France deployed troops to the country in 2013 to help drive out extremists who had occupied the north. Though the fighters have been pushed from main towns, a prolonged insurgency continues, with the violence having spread to neighbouring states.
We are here for Mali. We are here to demonstrate our national sovereignty, to remind the whole world that sovereignty belongs to the people, and that those who have not understood this must get up to speed today, because the transition for us today is the result of decades of mismanagement, misgovernance of our country and bad partnerships. We went out today in large numbers to show national and international opinion that this is the Malian people who decide their fate. That's why we are here.
It doesn't matter if France leaves or always stays. The point is that France is not the best suited to tell a country of the ground not to call on all its friends.
And we've come to the end of this news brief. Remember, you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. You can also follow us on social media for all the latest news. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and Telegram. For TeleSUR English, I'm Katrina Goss. Thank you for watching.